Oh, hello. Well, hello, folks. Good Monday. Um, Day off today. Um, what is it? Labor Day? Is it Labor Day? Hola from Maine. Hello, people from Maine. What up? Nova Scotia. Huh. That's awesome. Excuse me while I drink some coffee from me streaming in a car. Day off, yeah. Labor Day. Speaking of labor, Megan and I got the gender of our baby, which is synonymous with sex, which is binary. Neil Tyson Mustache. Um, for those of you on Instagram, I posted a comment from the last stream on YouTube. Some guy was like, Jim Bob, I love you, but the whole truther community has already debunked NASA and already uncovered all of that. So you'd be more useful, talking about the panopticon. Obviously, that guy's blocked from YouTube, but I don't pursue or explore or uncover truth because it's useful. Like, I do it because I have a love for the truth. And um not everyone's a truther. Not everyone sees the lie of NASA. And sometimes it takes not only one person, but a whole variety of people talking about it in different angles, in different argumentation, in different ways for some people to see it. So, I forgot the guy's name, Ty Gorton or something. Um, those are annoying people. Those are just annoying people because they think you're like a jukebox, and they don't produce anything, so they just think like they're there to just guide you. You know, um, but whatever, dude. It's like whatever. So yeah, we're excited. We're excited. I will reveal the gender soon. Uh, um, NASA's the biggest lie, always will be. Oh yeah, forgot someone else said something. Unfortunately, I can't share photos on YouTube. That's why I was tempted to do Instagram today, but okay. Mike's here. We can start. Um, yeah, you know, depending on the topic you're talking about, as far as like uncovering some truth or some lie, it's like for every person, there might be a very specific way they need to hear something. It's not, I actually think about this. I actually wonder if Alex Jones had gone far into the anti NASA stuff, if it actually would have um, really made it look too ridiculous. And there are people who are, I believe, are paid to make the questioning of it ridiculous. But I think about that too. Like, what if what if the psyop is that um, they need it to be up in the air, up in question. That they don't. It's not a total concealment. It's that they want it up in the air, and so they can't have it definitive. But of course, I mean, NASA lies, moon. I mean, it's so easy to just present what occurred. The best argument against the moon landing is just presenting what they say happened, just in a very nonchalant, ineffectual way, and then it makes it look absurd. Um, that's what I like to do. Dance monkey dance, exactly. And I don't mind some dance monkey dance, you know. I do impressions. It's pretty much dance monkey dance. But it's usually a question. I react well to questions. I don't react well to demands or like statements like just like generally unbased value judgments, which are just reduced to opinions. I'm like, what? What you talking about? Does this guy actually believe? Do you actually make your own moon, Jim Bob? Do you even make your own moons? Hi from the United Soviet States of Australia. I get mixed messages from Australia. A lot of people follow me, talk to me, and um, a lot of it, you know, understandably, is the nonsense is closer to the cities you get, closer, highly populated areas, the more likely they'll have standardized systems. The more they have standardized systems, the more likely these nonsense mandates and shows, entertainment shows occur. There's definitely a correlation between standardized systems and the nonsense. Jim Bob, how long you been a jewelry maker? Probably like 13 years. The vacuum next to a gaseous atmosphere blows it away. Yeah. Oh man, some of these people are insane though. Like, like all of, I mean, there's a couple of questions that if you corner people with, you don't have to like go like, oh, look how fake that footage is. You don't even have to do that stuff. There's a couple of questions you can ask point blank to help you in your. It's not even rhetoric because it's an actual question. Is show me an example of any gas next to a vacuum where the gas doesn't abide by and demonstrate the second law of thermodynamics, high pressure to low pressure, escape into available space. And then some people will say, well, it does. It's just so small. It's so small. And then others will say, well, the example is the Earth, duh. And you're like, well, that's what's in question, duh. Or they'll go, well, it's a gradient. Like that Mick Toon bozo, basically, when he's asked that question, he says, well, we have an example. We sent up a high altitude balloon with a pressure sort of barometer up there, and we showed you the gradient. It changed, the pressure changed. And we're like, that's not the question. The question isn't, can pressure change inside a container? The question is, can you actually discern or develop pressure without a container? And then after that, they say, well, gravity's the container. And then you ask what gravity is, and they say the bending of space-time, at which point you ask, well, what are the properties of space-time? And then it's over. Jordan, do you take orders? Well, I take orders from my internal self and sometimes my wife. And there's probably a state of mind that I could be in where I take orders from my dog. And it's like, depending on how broken I am, It's like, I've been in very dark places, where I've been in such dark places that I'll listen to anything that reflects light at all, And no one can explain gravity. Nobody. Should I resist mandate in Texas' largest musical theater to work again? Yeah, resist any nonsense. And call their bluff all the way to the end. Call it all the way to the end. Hi, Savage Memes Volume 3. When is it shipping? The pallet of books is on its way to us. So when we know it's getting here, we'll get a notification, and I'll do a post, I'll do a stream, I'll do emails, letting everybody know that their long, patient wait is close to over. Sweden and Portugal slapped a ban on Israelis entering their countries, including the VED. Yeah, it kind of makes sense. My RC car controls me. Yes, I mean, I had a friend over, you know. He's a little friend. His name is Sam Harris. He's a neurologist, you know. And I was showing him my new toy, you know. I got it's like one of the turbo RC cars, you know, one of the specialties with the gold spoiler, you know. And it's got these lobster claws on the front that pinch, that could basically catch flies, you know. And I was showing him that, and he said, you know, in classic Sam Harris rhetoric, he said, Jordan, soon, I mean, it would be absurd not to assume that we'll eventually connect our brains and our entire neurology and nervous system up to a controller much like the one you're holding right now. Well, that's crazy, Bucko. It's like what you can do is not a matter of whether you should do it or not, you know? And that's what some of, you know, in the world of science, discovery, and engineering, you know? It's like the question isn't what can we do, it's what should we do? And the thing is, I'd have to admit with some of my apologists that science cannot answer the questions of what we ought to do. That is an is-ought fallacy, you know? It violates the natural fallacy, you know? Yep. It's like science can't tell you whether you should put vanilla extract in your batter, you know? It's like I completely and entirely reject the gender bender, you know, non-binary nonsense, you know? But I will say this, you know? If I were to identify with someone who is the opposite sex, it would definitely be Julia Child, you know? It's like I really connect with her, you know? Phil, 499, thank you. Thanks for all you do, JB. I'm psyched to get the spicy and crunchy memes. Yeah, good. You know? These cartoon clowns don't even know the difference between gravity and gravitation. Well, nobody can know the difference between those because neither of those is established in any sort of way with any properties. Neither of those have been established as independent variables at all. So, you know, it's okay that people don't know what it is or the difference because neither of them have been established scientifically. So, I mean, in a way, why would they know the difference? They're not theories. They're not scientific theories. You know? I love Julia Child. You have that I'm having a boy alpha thing going on? Wow, Vin. Wow. Hey, Golden Ladle. Is it too late to buy our latest book? No, it's too late to get the stickers. The sticker pack, the bonus sticker pack. So the book's still available, but there's only a very limited amount of bonus pre-orders. And the people who ordered way back when we first launched the pre-order, again, thank you for your patience. Up until maybe last week. But no, you can still get the book, Powerlifter Bear. Hey, Arwen, what's going on? Oh, you meant the definition, pour me a beer, Lambert Law. Yeah, I mean, the definition It's just all defined, and then you change the variables of the definition. But what I found is, again, any of these clowns, you just simply ask a very simple question. Don't even say plural properties. Say, list one property of spacetime such that it's bendable and that you can determine that it's bendable. What are you measuring being bent? If not a physical property, name one property. They will not be able to do it. So if they can't name a property that establishes scientifically, empirically at least, that something called spacetime exists, first of all, and can be bent in the physical, because these are physics claims. This is not metaphysics, this is not philosophy. This is physics. This is the material world. This is natural science. So you ask them what one thing. If they can't produce a property, why should you believe every subsequent model assumption that's derived from the curvature of spacetime? Why should you? Is that skepticism to just accept that? Why would you accept that? Oh, these people are scientific. No, they're not. Why would you accept that? And you can stop them at that point and don't let them out of the corner. No, we're not going to talk about, you don't have to make it complex, McToon. Name one simple property. I asked him, he said, the properties of space-time is 4-dimension. What? What are you talking about? That's like saying the properties of a tape measure is inch. What? Do you bend the inch of a tape measure? No. You bend the tape, which is made out of some sort of metal. You can bend that. You can break it. You can hit the tape measure with a hammer. You can heat up the tape measure with a torch. It'll do something. You can manipulate the tape measure. But inch, the concept, the measurement, isn't a property at all. And this is what these people are trying to get away with. And it makes them look ridiculous when you ask them. It's like they just lose it. They just lose it, Same thing with the term experiment. If you just simply ask someone, can you do science without an experiment? They'll probably say no, but then they'll start arguing that modeling is a valid substitute for experiment, which it's not. Fox Day should do a second edition audiobook of Jordanetics when you do all the Jordan Peterson. I will definitely include, there's a little segment I wrote in my new animation series I'm developing called Back to Work. Jordan Peterson goes back to psychotherapy and has all of these pop culture, scientismo, actor guests, political guests and whatnot come and sit on his couch. And there is a section where he reads out of Jordanetics. Would you ever sit down with a physicist? Yeah, physicist, not an astrophysicist. I mean, if I sat down with an astrophysicist, there's only one way it would go. It would be they would bog me down with theoretical language, and then the people who appeal to that stuff would be like, he doesn't even understand this stuff. And I'm not interested in theoretical abstractions, Anyone who's a self-anointed astrophysicist, cosmologist, or astronomer, I would go face to face with them. It wouldn't need to be a debate. I would just have very simple questions for them that I know they couldn't answer, and then it would be embarrassing. But it's always gonna there's always gonna be a backlash to that, because it can be It doesn't change people's minds. Is light a property that can be bent? I don't know if light is a property. I'm not even certain light has a property, because when you get into that stuff, it gets theoretical. And I don't know enough about light, but I know that some things at the atomic or the particle theory, they're not actually like capturing items at the molecular level. They're just using a good metaphor, a symbol for something that operates at such a small scale that they can't really manipulate the same way we could like throw some apples into the air. But no, I don't understand enough about light. I don't know what light is. I know light is pretty mysterious, because the going claim is that it's a light, a wave, and a particle, but something, I don't really believe something can be a wave, because a wave is more of a behavior. You can call a body of water that's operating like a cascading wave. You can call it a wave because you're distinguishing the shape and the behavior of it from everything behind it that you can't really see that far, that seems to be just laying like flat, calm water. So like, oh, look at that wave. And what you're doing is making a distinction in the shape or the form of something, but you're not making the distinction about the properties of the water. The properties of the water is water, whatever. It's an ocean, salt water, algae, whatever else is involved. There's a property which is distinct from the behavior. But I'm not, there could be things that the property overlaps or is a blurred line with the behavior. I have no idea. I mean, that's way out of my wheelhouse. I can conceptualize it, but I know I know light is physical enough that you could manipulate it. You can intervene, you can stop it, you can remove it, you can add it. You can generate light, sonoluminescence, which is amazing, which does put into question whether, when we look up into the heavens, whether there is an aspect of water all the way up there, and that the way light behaves in water is similar to how light, what we call stars, are behaving. And to negate that those are similarities in observation is silly. But the fact that you can use sound to generate light, so like that means that there's some weird transposition of energy or a state that turns sound into light itself. And so that means sound isn't equal to light, just like a caterpillar isn't equal to the butterfly, but it could be the same thing. It could be the same item, you know? None of them use scientific process eliminating variables. Yeah. Waves don't exist according to theoreophofasis, Ken Wheeler. Yeah, there's some of his stuff that I can conceptualize and kind of get. He does get a little out there, and just drops a lot of words and pretends that it's simple, and then people, I think, get mesmerized by it. But some of the stuff, I mean, he's right as in his criticism about gravity, that, it can't be the bending of time. You can't bend time. You can't bend space. And just because you combine space and time doesn't mean you can suddenly get away from the fact that each of those things means something, conceptually. But there's some other stuff that he says that's kind of cool. I mean, he loses me all the Buddhist bullshit. He doesn't have a coherent metaphysics or ethics. Get more Mom Bob soon? Yeah, we'll definitely get more Mom Bob soon. Definitely. Have I heard of terrain theory? Yeah, I've heard of terrain theory versus germ theory. Again, I don't really understand it. Um, Again, I don't know if either are a theory because, again, to be rigorous with the scientific theory, you start from an observation and uh, and then suppose a cause of the phenomenon, and then you test it and see if it's actually causing the phenomenon or not. And so I'm not certain that germ theory or terrain theory are actually scientific theories, or if that term theory is just used colloquially. Like people use it as like a hunch, a concept, an abstract idea. Um, and then some people use the term theory as if it's like some sort of like it diminishes what it is, its validity, which is weird because I can understand that, you know rhetorically, but when you think about it, it's like, no, an actual scientific theory went through the steps. Like, I've argued with scientismos about this and simply asked, they think a theory comes first. They think science is this. I have a theory. Like that's what they think it is. It's really not. It's, oh, look at that. Look at that thing happening. Huh. I wonder what's causing that to happen. How do I reconstruct a simulation, a sim of that, an experiment of that thing happen, and then imagine that maybe it's that one thing that's causing it. Can I introduce that one thing that I think is causing it? Will it produce the same effect? And if I remove that thing, will the effect go away? But that doesn't totally secure that it's that thing because you might be missing some variables. Maybe you don't see some variables. Maybe, yeah, maybe there's other things around in the control that you're missing. And so you keep experimenting. Terrain theory is very scientific. Yeah, I don't know enough about it. You can test terrain theory. Just poison someone observed. Yeah, that makes sense to me. If I guess I get lost with the term terrain, which I assume just means your environment. What's the input? Like there's must always be an input, I assume. Like if you eat mercury, you can test its poison on you. If you remove vitamin C from someone and causes scurvy, you can test that in repeatable ways. Um, so that makes sense to me. But I guess there's an abstract, more ambiguous thing I've seen. Maybe it does. Maybe it's misrepresenting terrain theory, but that there's some sort of unknown cause of cyclical illness and the purging of toxins based on where you are and in your environment, and you're not totally certain what's influencing you in your environment. And I think at that point, it would hold some truth. But if the reality was that there were so many things that was were being input in your body. I mean, think of your body, think of your skin as the most absorbent organ. Um, it doesn't negate the theory; it just draws it out to like, wow, like we might not ever get to the bottom of what's going inside of our body, given all of the things we do and all the places we go and all of the foods that we eat or don't eat, and it's a big task. The issue with virology is they have no independent variable, none at all. Their entity has not been pulled from the human and proved. Yeah, yeah, I've seen that summary before. And the other thing that makes me partial to terrain theory in general is because there's not a huge investment of profit, capitalism, psychopathic pharmaceutical companies that would enjoy that being true. I mean, there's nothing to gain. If you that's why capitalism without morality and honesty, it just leads to false narratives being distilled into products and services. Think about like the masks and all the custom masks. You put your logo on it. Do this, do that. You know, get a little biome on your head. You know, and you can see how products and services can actually prop up something that's totally false. And then what's worse is that once those products and services are in the circulation, they become a part of culture, aka a NASA t-shirt. And then it's very difficult because then when the mother sits and makes a mask, a cute little piggy mask or whatever with their kid, you're now going against the mask and what it means and what it is and isn't and all of that stuff. You're actually going against the moment that they share together, similar to Conan O'Brien, sitting with his dad. I remember it very clearly. I remember I came down, we watched you guys land on the moon. No, you didn't. So you're saying your experience is false. Your memory of yourself is false. That's how tricky products and services, cultural adaptation of false narratives through products and services can be, how powerful it is. Terrain theory is all about the compounding influence of toxicity, typically variable through environmental change, air, light, food. Yeah, once you get into like mass psychogenic illness, I mean, we're talking a lot about way more too. That's what I was talking about. How the variables you can keep expanding in their different categories of variables, like mental state. The fact that a nocebo is provably a catalyst for certain, like you can produce symptoms. In other words, you can produce outcomes and symptoms mentally. Mass psychogenic illness is real, and yet, is there really an actual physical variable, an input, a physical variable? What I'm saying is, some things, at least with our own behavior in our body, can be influenced by something that might be rooted conceptually, and this is not an argument for gravity, by the way. It's just that if you have a mental state that you definitely think you're constantly exposed to something horrible, you will eventually produce negative shit going on in your body. So is that physical? Is that a physical variable that you can isolate? I don't know. I think it's more like, it's like a mindset you'd have to take someone's word for that they have. Like they're like, I'm worried about this. I'm worried. I mean, it's very hard to test the impact of fear in a way, in my view, in a way that's scientific, because these things are conceptual, but we know they impact us. If someone thinks they've had bad allergies, then the pollen comes along, they have worse symptoms. Yeah, that's interesting. My dad watched the death ticker. Yeah, what happened to the death ticker, guys? Now it's the case ticker? Kind of weird. Jim Bob, your channel goes against what who says. Who? Boo hoo. Yeah. I wish there was more scientismos in here. It is said that everything is made up of sine and cosine waves. Yeah, again, I'm not aware of what those actually are. Um, but again, it's like what's a wave? What's a wave? Mm, mm. I lost taste and smell for a couple days, but it was like the flu. Yeah, you could even know a bunch of this is nonsense and still have symptoms consistent with the nonsense. Do you have an issue with all V's or just mRNA? I don't, I'm not invested in any of them. Why? Because once you look at the scientific method, you realize, wait a second, there's actually not a way to affirm or verify that someone who's gotten a shot, whether it's traditional or not, it's actually doing the job that you think it's doing. In other words, you would need to know if that person and when they were in contact with the thing they got the jab for, and know that the thing they got the jab did, the jab itself did the thing it was supposed to do, as opposed to a bunch of people who didn't, and it would be very difficult to determine, you know, who did better, with their body. It's like, how are you going to track all of that and confirm it? It's like, we know someone who got the jab and had like all of the measles or the what's the second chicken pox? Shingles. They had all of the vaccines for that, and then they got the jabby jab, and then they got the shingles. You know what I mean? Bob, have you ever looked at John Dee and his works? Yeah, I have his whole um, book biography and his entire diary. A lot of it is just out there. People think if you get a cold, then you must have Karonka. Yeah, exactly. I mean, how much worse can your cold get if you think it's going to kill you? A word on correlations and statistical significance. A correlation could point to a cause, but it could inform, but it doesn't prove a cause at all. So, it's you can't it's not like you just throw it out, but you just go, "Oh, that's an interesting correlation. We should look further into the cause." That's what a correlation's more like a signal. It's like, "Hey, might be something over here, but doesn't mean there is." You would need to have another Earth with the same exact conditions and only, yeah. Yeah, that's why I think I'll say it again. It's like all major deceptions, the requirement for it to work on people is that it's literally impossible to access a reference point because it's at such a mass scale. You know, it's like when someone goes, "Prove that footage is fake of the moon landing or the LEM taking off," right? I mean, you're like, this should be beyond proof. This should be like your basic human intuition of what is real and what is not, just based. But obviously, that's not no longer a something you can appeal to. But But that's right. You you can pull off mass scale deceptions, especially if it's at a scale that's you have no reference point, you know. So you can go with these nonsense theories because the only possible model that supports the hunch is the model we're in, and you can't replicate the entire model, you know. You know, you can't do it. So you have to just assume. NASA has a monopoly on reference when it comes to space. Yeah, that's what they did. They basically monopolized the reference. Well said. That's what their guidance system is. We think their guidance system is just like, oh yeah, like some ladies did some math on a chalkboard and wrote it down, and it guided those men to the moon, and they landed, and then they took off, and there was a guy with a remote control because they set up a camera, and first time ever they took off, and the cameraman was able to pan up perfectly as the LEM took off. You know, it didn't just take off, it went straight up. And by straight up, I mean it went up and it reconvened horizontally with the central command module that was traveling at 10,000 miles per hour. Yeah, they have a monopoly on that, on the reference point of what space is. They get to change the definitions. They own the vocabulary. You know, they own the references of what a photo looks like, what's real, what's fake, but they also mix it all up so that you don't know, you know. I mean, they do that in other fields. They'll do a nonsense shooting. They'll have a real shooting, and you won't be able to tell the difference. NASA holds the copyright to the science fiction franchise of outer space. Yeah, outer meaning what? 60 miles up. It's insanity. But I mean, there's still people who think that a tower can collapse on itself with zero observable resistance. Like a broken piece at the top eighth of the building can demolish and pulverize into dust at free fall speed till there's nothing left. People think that that's possible now. I mean, 9/11 was the moon landing in reverse. It's like they sold a bunch of boomers on a TV with their little TV dinners of something going up with no resistance, no problem. And then years later, the same boomers were sitting there and going, "Whoa, well, look at that thing go down. Look, we saw the one thing go off the earth with zero resistance and it's totally unjustifiable. And now we're seeing something fall down with zero resistance." You know, it's so simple about that. You know, aside from obviously building 7, but it's very simple. Anyone who argues that there wouldn't be any resistance, they're basically denying that the building itself was standing before it collapsed. Think about it. If the building is standing and there's a broken section above it, you know, big hole in the top, the bottom section, the entire thing, all the way up to the top, is holding, it's standing. And because it's standing, that means there's resistance. That means that weight, force, pressure is being distributed downward. And because it's standing, it's impossible that suddenly none of that structure is there in a moment. It's impossible. The fact that it was standing at all means there would be resistance no matter what was occurring. And people just delete that from their head. They go, no, it's a dynamic weight, gravity. They say dynamic, it was a dynamic load. Really? Okay, can you replicate it? Again, you talk about scale. Can you replicate it? And you show experiments that's impossible. And they go, yeah, but you're doing it at this scale. And they're arguing that physics suddenly changes, right, at a scale of 110 stories. But they also argue that, you know, 350 miles up, it's so small and so, relative to Earth, it's so small that you're still rotating within the atmosphere. And so you don't notice. Yet the tower, 110 stories is too big to replicate, to know. Like, how are you possibly supposed to know what it would look like, Jim Bob? It's the same argument. They have a monopoly on carnage, a monopoly on the presentation of horror, and only psychopaths will seek the monopoly of horror, its presentation, because normal people are just good, assume a creator, assume morality, simple, live simply, seek immaterial values, love, compassion, kindness. And these other small group of psychopaths are like, how do we manipulate the presentation of horror so that the people we're doing this to can never reference what actual horror looks like because it's all mixed in with our art? Seems like all the things they pull off don't really have another reference. They don't. They just don't. And they'll always say, not at that scale. No, it's different, Jim Bob. There's something called the dynamic load. You see, what happens is when the first couple of 10, floors collapse, there's such a dynamic load that's added with 9.8 meters per second squared, whatever. And then it pancakes everything below it. So every time it comes together, it comes down, one more floor is added to that mass and that force. You're like, no. Every time it smashes the floor below it, there's equal and opposite, and the force is distributed downward. So it actually cancels out every time it smashes. It doesn't add. You don't just like add. Oh, it just adds it. It just collects its energy and adds it. Oh, really? So that's what's crazy, is that you can't smash a floor unless the force is equally distributed down and up at the same time. That's like saying, the VW bug, it was traveling so fast, and it smashed into a line of other VW bugs that were connected together, but it was traveling, it was so much force that every new VW bug that it smashed, it acquired that VW's force and continued to smash the other VW bugs until there were no VW bugs. It's a shit show. Dynamic load is the one in their pants after they score. Yeah, after they won that. Zimbab. I had a boomer tell me last week that Building 7 fell because of the other two towers damaged. Again, you'll never, if that's their story, it's fine. You're not going to convince someone who goes, yeah, totally, the other thing collapsed on it. And in their head, it's fine. Like, it'll always make sense. That's why I think Building 7's actually not the smoking gun, because as long as you someone's convinced that a big building fell on a small building, that's all they need in their little head. I think it really comes down to show me any structure, big or small. Repeat this. Repeat the phenomenon of 1/8 of a structure falling and crushing the 7/8 structure below it that was holding it up in free fall speed, no resistance. You can't do it. You can't. Direct energy is the only explanation. Yeah, for it to be pulverized into complete dust. Otherwise, the way those buildings were built, it's basically a tube. it's a square tube, but it's like, think of a cylinder that's a square shape with a tube in it, like a cannoli. And all you got to do is access all four of the elevator shafts that make up the entire internal core of the building, which means the internal core is actually empty, absent the beams. And the only way you could collapse those things and have it fall that way is if all of those beams are uh, sliced or weakened at intervals, not weakened with heat, weakened with intervals. I saw some idiot welder who was like, "That's it. I'm putting these conspiratorial retards to shame." And he heated up a rod, right? And then he went over to his table and he said, "Look, does this look melted? No. Can heat weaken steel? Well, let's see." And what he did is he bent it this way, right? With tweezer, like the hot tongs. But before he bent it, right, while he was talking all fancy, you can still find this image. He slams the hot, red hot beam, the little rebarb, down on the table. And what he didn't realize he was doing is that you can weaken steel or metal. I'm a metallurgist. You can anneal it and weaken it, and it can go this way or this way. But if you go like this downward and hit it, even with a little hammer, if it's vertical and you're hitting it down, it'll hold its structure. It'll go dun, dun, dun. And that's exactly what he did. You could look it up. You look up like welder debunks 9/11 or something. You see it. He heats it up. He goes over to the table, and before he does his bend, which doesn't replicate what we saw, he hits down on the top, which is actually replicates what we saw, what we would have seen. And you see that the metal doesn't move at all. It maintains its structure even when it's red hot. And that's why he took off the comments to that video. How do novice pilots fly jetliners into specific targeted speeds? Oh, it's impossible. I don't even know how that occurs. That's a whole other level I haven't even looked into. I know that if that was the case, there's no way it's possible for four successful hijacks to happen and three of them hit their target, one of them being the most secured, most protected airspace in the world, that somehow only had one camera going when this alleged plane hit the Pentagon, which is silly because if you look at the footage, all I have to do is measure what a 747 is and then measure the height of what the Pentagon is, which is about 72 feet. And you simply take a direct measurement on the screen of the object and of the height of the building. And you go, oh, that's impossible that that's what they say it is. Recording Where's My Mind, But Where's My Hat with JLP. That's funny. I mean, we're so beyond informational warfare. That's why InfoWars, it's no longer the case. It was the case maybe when there was a time where you can convince people. But if people believe that there is a Tesla floating around in space, they believe that cartoon. No information is going to change that person. They are blinded spiritually. It's another thing happening. It's a way beyond show new information. It's way beyond. Five frames from a garbage camera. Yeah. There's only 212 cameras around the perimeter of the entire Pentagon, but none of them were on that day. That didn't get shot down either. We're going to shoot down the other one in Pennsylvania, but the one that's going to make an impossible right turn into the Pentagon is going to just like do its thing. And you're going to get one crappy camera from the gate toll. Come on. Is the jab the mark? I don't think so. I think the mark will get a little more technical and on the nose. You think the planes were projections? Yeah, I don't know. Again, reference point. They're going to say, how were you going to... I mean, if I was rich, if I was Elon Musk, you know what I would do? Again, it wouldn't work, by the way. This is how stupid people are. But if I was rich enough, I would buy some land. I would build a tower exactly modeled to the Twin Towers. Exactly. Every office, everything, add some furniture. Same thing, same exact model, as close to. And I would make I would make weaker beams. I would use weaker steel beams, like the weakest you can find. And I would just pay for an airplane to fly into it, nearly the same. But again, it doesn't matter, because the people who commit to that would be like, well, it hit a different way. There would always be something. It doesn't matter. It's back. Hey, Tyler. Yeah. Oh, did the stream go down? I didn't notice. I think there are a bunch of marks of the beast. Well, I think about the beast, it's like it usually refers literally to the Antichrist, but it's also always referencing the beast, which is the worldliness, the world. And so, yeah, I agree. There's always some, maybe that's the only part of evolution I actually believe. I tried to watching the debate, Witsit, McToon. Couldn't stand to listen to McToon for the whole stream. Well, debates in general are pretty intolerable. There aren't many I can listen to, and most you have to turn off, because it's a lot of repetition and a lot of people not, all I needed to do is write the question a couple times at the end of one of those debates to someone like McToon and see how he responds, to know whether it's even worth it asking questions or debating someone. Because if they just don't answer and they go, I'm not going to, you look that up, I'm not going to do that, Hello, Jumbo. I have a question, please. With Agenda 2030, neo-feudal plan for you to own nothing and be happy, a possibility to raise land taxes, astronomical levels. Well, I think it all depends on where you are. I think the closer proximity to cities, that's who they target. They want the system of John Calhoun's mouse experiment. They want a probably 50 to 100 mile radius around the city for farming, and they want to co-opt that. So they dominate the supply chain, and then they put up all of their Amazon temples that fly their little honeybees and their essentially their the flying monkeys um, out and get you your apples. And then so as far as taxes, yeah, they're going to come up with raising taxes, but different taxes. The more connected you are biologically, mentally, the more you connect your neuro system to their system, the more standardized all things are, the more taxation will be directed to the atomic level, which means you'll be taxed on things you did that day, um, you know, taxed on whatever. I mean, they can think of anything because the goal of the agenda, at least in the environmental paradigm, is to legally categorize human beings as environment and not as individuals. In which case, you can become enemy combatants in the event of an emergency that's declared in the area of environment. Now, we kind of bypass that with the pandemic because they've just taken that environmental approach and they've just categorized everybody as a danger enemy combatant with because they're a danger to their family and themselves because uh, they might have a cough, um, and so it's all the same nonsense plan. The bad news is that the more dummies, the consumerists, the materialists, the atheists are more prone to going into that world. And so the good news is there's a split, and people can actually opt out of it as long as they're willing to be honest with themselves about what kind of life that is, which is a simple life but difficult life. Doing more of your own labor, knowing more of the people that do labor around you. Inconvenience. Think of inconvenience as somewhat of your path. If there's a pathway out, there's two paths that go convenience, inconvenience. It's almost guaranteed at this point. If you take the inconvenient or the convenience path, it'll lead you to on the yellow brick road to the Emerald City, and you're going right to the clown world. The inconvenience will lead you to some meadow, and it'll be a little bit difficult to live, but be worth it. So those things are all the same. Tax is just a term. They're just like, how do we tax? They already tax you. It's like it's almost like tax is a psyop. It's like what? Think of it this way: what is taxation if the entire system in which you trade your labor is based on debt anyway, and it's controlled more and more so far as how you can wield and utilize your labor itself, and the more the trend goes to outsourcing your labor, and so there is no more labor anymore. So what is tax when labor is replaced with outsourced little Chinese hands or robots? It's like it's almost like the taxation argument is just some. It's like it's like a silly false argument they try to pull centrists and righties in with and libertarians in with when their reality it's actually the quickness of production and the outsourcing and you removing yourself as the person making things that causes any of those arguments in the first place. It's like taxation is nonsense to me. It's not even worth arguing for if you've already gotten to the point where you don't even know who makes anything. I worked on the joint staff pandemic and civil unrest plans. It gets ugly. Yeah, I mean, they're pushing all this stuff. The whole point is to get people into, at the local level, the policy of, what is it called? There's an actual policy that's a worldwide policy. It's called anti-fragility. It's basically a bunch of unelected symposium psychopaths determining what's fragile and on the verge of something collapse. And so if you get a bunch of people whose power and their status relies on the imminent collapse, they don't actually want or need the collapse to happen. They just need you to constantly think it's happening. And then that'll split people up into people who don't care because they are learning self sufficiency. And then the people who do care and they're just left in fear. Oh my God, everything's going to shit. It's all going to collapse at any moment. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And so it kind of like, it's really genius how they do that. Do I like electric? I mean, I'll play with electric. I just don't. I like acoustic. I like that it's harder to put, hold the strings down. You know, it's simple. It's stripped down. I'm folky. Witsit is a focused man. Solid advice he has. Debates are usually people weaseling out of interesting questions, sneaky tactics. Yeah, it all ends up being nonsense. The most enjoyable part of a debate is the invalid parts, which are the rhetoric, the insults, and the questions. You know, questions, the answers. I saw your question got totally deflected. It was pathetic. Yeah, yeah. James doesn't really press because he doesn't really know the content. I think he's kind of a fun mediator because he doesn't get upset with much. He doesn't look at people like they're total. He might, but he doesn't express that he thinks they're total idiots or whatever, which is better than most any mainstream. But yeah, that guy deflected. That McToon guy is a total coward. I mean, I asked him the same question 3 times, and that's super chatting. It was an expensive question. I worked on a firm on a class action suit from 7-Eleven. It was mostly finding a way to get billable hours. That's funny. Still lingering. It's like these disasters are so useful to people. This is the other reason people are prone to believing nonsense because if it's a disaster, I don't know if you've seen the video I posted. The guy almost getting hit by a van in the alley, and he does this whole thing. Well, the disaster is like a big ass carcass, a big whale carcass that it's a disaster. Everyone's at the beach and it's beautiful and everything's normal. And then this big rotting carcass shows up and it's a disaster and it smells and it's a environmental issue. It's an animal rights issue. It's a this issue. It's a that issue. Everyone needs a tissue. And then but then there's all these feeders that love the carcass and they're like, oh, this is an issue. And they plot out a little section of the body to start eating away at, and it could last for years. Be like, oh, I love this. It's like, I hate that this happened, but ooh, I can really, it's going to happen with Karunka. There's going to be these suits 10 years from now about how the shutdowns were unjustified and that, you lost X amount of dollars. And you're just basically going to be perpetually asking your masters who print money to print more money, to give you some printed money. Crisis capitalism, exactly. Yeah, but it would be good if a mediator actually was like, no, you didn't answer that. So are you saying there's no properties of space-time, McToon? You can't just weasel out of it. And if they don't hold them to it, it means that it's obvious they're partial. So it's pretty clear that James, as nice a guy as he uh, is not uh, is not stopped in his thinking by those debates, and he's partial to McToon's view. So anyway, I'll be working more on my cartoon. My animation. Um, Still doing some work on The Office. I think I need to add a bookshelf though, even though it's a lot of work to draw all those books and name them and color them and have them on the shelf. I think it makes more sense to have Jordan Peterson have a giant bookshelf, maybe behind the couch or behind him. Whereas right now he has like a corrugated metal wall with a couple of art pieces. So I think I have to do that. I'm gonna take my time because a lot of times I'll rush and I'll put something out that's kind of halfy and it's still funny, but you know, this is one of those things. I want to see what's possible when I actually put time in and I don't like feel rushed. Um, do 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 do. But I actually challenged a guy named Tom Jump. I actually wrote a super chat and I said, Tom, I'll debate you on modern debate. Um, and you affirm that astronomy is science, and I'll refute it. And I think his answer was, I'll debate anybody for $150. And I was like, ew. So that's what it is. Jordan Peterson should be sitting on a Sybian. That's hilarious and disgusting. Jordan, what advice do you give the people who want to read more? Well, I mean, read more, you know? That's like asking someone, can you give me advice about walking more? It's like, get up. It's like, read the words, you know? It's like, I want to cook more, you know? It's like there's a part of me that really wants to crack an egg, you know? It's like when you look at an egg, you know? It's like, it's the space. It's contained, you know? It's like there's something inside of it, but also the egg is a part of it. It's like the shell is distinct from the inside, you know? But it's also inseparable for the time being, you know? And it's like we know that life transcends form because the life itself is not identical to its form, you know? It's like the pancake isn't just the shape of a disc, you know? It's like if I do a snake-shaped pancake, you know? It's still a pancake. You know? T-Jump is a huge healer. Well, I've asked that guy a question too on the same debate channel. That's why I like the channel is at the end you can just simply confront them with everything that was either confronted or just didn't stick in the debate. And something I asked him is, I said, T-Jump, give me one experiment, valid experiment done in astronomy. Of course, he said the LIGO experiment. And I said, well, okay, I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy. I said, give me one independent variable. I think he said time. Or he said, you look up the independent variables. They're listed right there in the paper or whatever. It's like, okay. Okay. Would your wife consider covering her head? Not really. I mean, there's no real cultural basis for it. You knew? We knew. Thank you, Jordan. I'll totally read more now. Yes! It's really simple questions, though, when you get down to it with these people. What's your hypothesis? What's your observed phenomenon? Like that's why science is kind of cool, not scientismo, but science itself, because even children, if they know the method, they could ask very basic questions. So if I have a feeling that if you got a bunch of classically trained scientists, fifth graders, sixth graders, seventh graders, and they went to some of these places that debate, like Adildo Dawkins, and they asked them, we know evolution is true. I saw Jurassic Park. I saw it. I saw it. Yum, yum. And then the kid's just like, Dildo, what's the mechanism at work? What is evolution as in presented as a cause and effect relationship? What is actually causing it? What's the thing at work? Well, what do you mean? It's evolution, yeah? Yeah. Daddy. Oh, Daddy. You sound like Daddy. Daddy wanted me to explore sport. Explore the balls. He wanted me to learn football or cricket. I said, no, Daddy. I want to study cricket. I don't want to play cricket. Yeah? But you ask any of these people, it's stay within the realm of what science is, and they can't deal. They're like, you're one of those guys who actually use like the classical term science. You mean the only term, the only science, the only method there is? Yeah, but that's like semantics. Oh, like the meaning of words? Yeah. No. Yes. I am not going to debate someone who is questioning the absolute fact, the brute, well-established fact that evolution is real. Huh? Everything that we do. You can believe all your spaghetti monster myths, that were written 2,000 years ago by the poor little peasants. Meow, meow. You little peasant. You can believe that if you want. You can believe your fairy tales, yeah? But the fact is that all human behavior, all behavior in every organism, in the world, in life, yeah? Is a function of evolution, is a function of survival, is a function of adaptation. And it's you believers of God, these things, these silly little things that are not based in science. It is you, people, who hold us back from exploring the truth. Yeah, but Dildo, you just said all behavior and everything we do is part of the evolutionary process and is a part of survival, adaptation, and whatnot. So how could you have an argument against religious people if they are necessarily a part of the thing you believe to be strictly evolutionary? Don't. I see what you did there. Naughty boy. Naughty boy. How did you get in here? Show me your lanyard. Show me your lanyard. Yes. No. Anyway. Yes. Everything we do. That's another argument against all those people. Any of them. Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, rational atheist guy, cosmic skeptic dude. Who's that creepy pervert guy? Levi Strauss was his name. Lawrence Krauss. Any of these guys, you get them to say the absolute claim that all behavior and everything we've created and do as human beings, as organisms, is all for adaptation, all for survival, nothing more than a pitiless attempt to just exist and to pass down our traits. If they go there, you just simply go, then what can your argument be against evolution? I mean, against religion, against theology, against God? They have no logical reason to refute God. They always get so angry. Yeah, and they swear by truth. They swear by truth, and that's another thing that you can always get them with. You just simply say, any argument you conjure up against the existence of God, please use it against truth itself, and you'll see how faithful you are to immaterial absolute concepts. The only difference is theists attribute and justify absolute concepts with a mind greater than theirs. Is that irrational? No. Concepts habitually come from mind. Can you create absolute concepts as a human? No. Can you discover them? Yes. So all the atheist does is just presuppose laws of logic, meaning, language, math, angles, degrees, octaves, sounds, frequencies, wavelengths, any sort of order. Truth. They presuppose it, and they just say it's ad hoc. It just is. Like a natural law guy. A natural law is just as ad hoc as atheism. Someone wrote, why do you pick on anarchy so much? It's just natural law, which is AKA God's law. And it's like, no, it's not. No, God's law is free will, but you can sin. You do sin. You act against yourself. You act against others. So anarchy, no, natural law, there's nothing. In fact, we're not of the world. We're in it. Natural law is in the world. That's in the world. There's nothing in the world you can point to that has prescriptive law. Where in nature is there prescribed law for what we ought to do? Nowhere. Yeah, but just don't take stuff. No. Sorry, but morality is not confined to don't take my stuff or steal my stuff or hurt me. Those are very baseline attributes of what you believe to be right and wrong. You can act against yourself. You can act immorally and not hurt anybody or steal their stuff. You know? But that's what the natural law materialists, the libertarians, the Ayn Rands, that you don't need anything else metaphysically. You do not need anything above what is here in front of us, empirically, objectively. You don't need anything other than what we have to determine what is good and what is bad. Because the ultimate virtue, the ultimate basis for morality is existence itself, because all other values come from existing, and therefore destroying someone's existence or halting their existence is, in fact, immoral. Sometimes I suck my borscht through my teeth. You can deduce natural law from reason. I mean, you can reason anything you want. It doesn't matter. You can, you can reason from natural law that you should take over a town using force. It doesn't determine or tell you whether that's morally good or not. It's nonsense. Natural law is practical reason. Yeah, and pragmatism isn't the basis of morality. What's practical isn't what's moral. What's pragmatic isn't what's moral. What's preferable isn't what's moral. The basis of morality can't be any of those things that we determine from correspondence. We see, oh, that, I can get that. I should have that. I like that. These things, we can't derive, morality from them. 10 Commandments are natural law. No, they're not. 10 Commandments are God's law. God is not the natural. God's not identical to nature. The nature is the creation. How can a creation give you prescriptions, Christopher? Can a rock give you a prescription for how to behave? Can a tree tell you to not commit adultery or murder? No, not at all. None of those things are justified. Absolutely not. I'll always get a natural law buff in my stream because they don't want to deal with that. There's a moral implication of their own existence absent, behavior that influences other people. The natural law proponents don't want to assume that what they do in private with themselves can actually have a moral implication. They think, well, if I just stay confined and the things I think and do privately, as long as, there's consent and, it's private and nobody knows and doesn't hurt anybody, then it's fine. No. God's law is supernatural. Yeah, it's supernatural. Nature is not supernatural. Natural law comes from God. Yeah, there is a law in nature. It's cause and effect. You can say God provided the creation, but nature can't tell us what's good. So morality is separate from nature. It's supernatural. Laws of logic are supernatural. Math is supernatural. Information is supernatural. And a whole slew of other things. Meaning, language. It's beyond nature. We have a different definition of natural law. Yeah, I mean, you're using Aquinas. Aquinas tried to reduce God's law to nature, to man, but he was wrong. It doesn't matter what you define it as. There's nothing in nature that tells us something supernatural. There's nothing in nature that can prescribe behavior to you. God's law is written on our hearts. Absolutely. It's not based in nature, though. Aquinas was wrong. You should toss that out. It's impossible to justify. In fact, Aquinas is committing a fallacy. It's the naturalistic fallacy. It's the is-ought fallacy. And even one of the most famous empiricist atheists, David Hume, admittedly and famously made it a clear violation of logic. And that's why Aquinas was wrong. Aquinas meshed the Bible with the philosophy of the day. Yeah, it's all like, it's the provenance of enlightenment. All of those guys that followed, just like, yeah, we don't need to justify any of this stuff. Like, there's probably a God, but let's stick to what we can see. Let's stick to natural law. Natural law simply says, I can take you over with enough force as long as I know the risks. Natural law is, if I do this, this is the result. That's it. Hume may have been a clown, but he was right about that. Hume was a clown does not actually refute that Aquinas commits the naturalistic fallacy, is a fallacy. We don't get commands from nature. Divine law, scripture, natural law. Yeah, there's no such thing as natural law. The law of nature is just what is. Okay?
Hurry up.
Okay. The law of nature is just what is, not what ought to be. Do you think reincarnation is real? No.
I have blood in my teeth.
Oh. Okay. All right, I'll be out. I'll be done in a couple minutes. Natural law is practical reason. Yeah, you can call it whatever you want. Or you can say practical reason is practical reason. Do you think reincarnation... Oh, yeah, I already answered. Would it be a good explanation for Michael Malice? I don't know. Yeah, it could be. I mean, I think he's just the grandson of Ayn Rand. Blood in one's teeth is natural law. Natural law is just nonsense. It just doesn't, there's nothing to even talk about because all you could possibly reduce it to is what is. It's like saying natural law is what is. And you're just like, well, what is what is. You know, the world, you can view the world as it is. But the very, you know, there's physics, there's what occurs. There's the thermodynamics. There are laws of physics, and that's what we observe. It's like we watch the law of animal in the wild. Is there a law? Is there a law? It's just, you know, the alligator gets in the wrong spot, you know, and dies or kills someone or whatever. It's like, what are we determining here? You can deduce the existence of God from reason. Yeah, you can deduce reasonable faith from reason and logic, but when it comes down to it, it's all faith. You know, it's all faith. You actually have to have faith in reason itself. You can't just start from reason. You actually need faith to even attempt to reason anything. Like everything presupposes metaphysical assumptions that can't be proven by the things you're assuming. So you just can't do it. So natural law is just cause and effect. You shouldn't go around going, we get our morality from natural law. You don't. You can't reason it. You can't justify it. You can't logically ground the claim. So it's like Aquinas should have been shut down quicker than he was. There's no natural law for information except that there has to be an original knower. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what, you know, the term that's constantly used as natural law is like something we can observe repeatedly with the same phenomenon outcome, you know. But people's, you know, they go, natural law. It's like, you know, I exist, you know, don't tread on me. I have dignity because I exist, and that's what makes me have dignity because I exist. And, you know, don't take it away. It's natural law. It's like, what? But rights exist to fulfill a duty. No, rights don't exist. Rights are metaphysical assumptions that are mostly based in a state system that affirms the consequences of violation of a right. In natural law, without a justice system, there's no rights. There's just what you're willing to do to get what you want, knowing the risk that you might get hurt or die. So rights, you don't even have rights. You don't have rights. You have a gift called life. People think, oh, I have the right to life. No, you have the gift of life, and you could either honor your creator and his commands in a response to that gift, or you can try to invert the gift of life to the right to life by a bunch of feather pen Freemasons who tried to basically take God's law and put it into the physical form with their little ink and their feather. Thou shalt not, natural law. That is not natural law. Thou shalt not kill. Well, you can say what is and isn't natural law all you want. All you're doing is appealing to a bunch of, Enlightenment philosophers that desperately wanted to figure out a way to no longer justify the laws of logic. They just accepted, okay, we have logic, we have reason, therefore we can deduce morality is somehow a consequence of existing itself, and we can derive what we ought not to do based on natural law itself. It's nonsense. Natural law is the laws of physics, but in the moral claim. It's not, though. You can't equate those two because the laws of physics is what is, like math describes, and morality is prescription, which needs to come from a giver. Nature isn't its own giver of law. It's impossible. It's illogical. Aquinas was not Enlightenment. No, I'm talking about the people after that wanted to keep that trend going. Thou shalt not kill is a commandment. Thou shalt not kill is not a natural law. It's not a natural law. It's actually the opposite of a natural law. Spend time with your young ones. Thanks, Tristan. Yeah, I got to end this. But I can go on and on against natural law. It's just, you got to look further into it. It just sounds good, but really you're not saying much. It's like there's God's law, and then there's how the law of nature operates around us. And it's like, yeah, but the difference between humans and nature is that we're not of the world. So we're not in the realm of, we live in nature, but we're not of nature. So we appeal to supernatural. So there's only supernatural law in the sense that tells you what you should do and not do. There's nothing in natural law that can ground what you ought to do morally. So when people appeal to natural law in the realm of morality, they're making a mistake, because morality itself is a supernatural concept. You can't find morality in nature. It's just not there. Thou shalt not sleep on poor people's sheets. That is correct. That is correct. If it was natural law, nobody would ever kill. Yeah. I mean, you can't separate the word what natural means when you say natural law. It could only be reduced to nature and what we see with ourselves and with other animals and other things around it. Which, what separates us from other animals is we're made in the image of God, and we have access to transcendental, metaphysical, supernatural law. We have access to all of those things. And we have access, they were gifts to us so that we can know him. They weren't gifts to us so we can figure out the world and know man's information. Man, for instance, man's law is the attempt to invert God's law, and natural law is the attempt to reduce God's law into physical form. You have a different definition. Natural law is practical reason. Yeah, whatever you want to call it. Practical reason doesn't tell us what is good, what is evil. Doesn't tell us what we ought to do. Practical reason is pragmatism. Pragmatism is arbitrary because what's pragmatic is given by a goal, and goals are arbitrary. So I could have practical reason about mass murder. I can reason practically about how to annihilate a whole tribe of people. I can be very practical. I can reason it. I can think of the pragmatic advantages. I can think of the risks and the rewards. And none of that tells me whether I ought to do that or not, or whether that's an act against God. Buffalo, ball and branch. Ball and branch, folks. Ball and branch, folks. And if man wants to cut a very small hole in that bleeding well, that's his right too. Yeah, rights are nonsense. You have the right to go murder someone. The only thing that in physical space that makes it, that assumes it's not a right, is that there's a consequence to it. But that actually doesn't take away your right. You can go kill someone. You have the right to actually do that. They have the right to defend themselves in rights, and rights means it assumes consequences are then looked over and litigated. Oh, did he have the right to do that? It's all post. It's all post. You look at it afterwards in hindsight. Did you have the right to do that? Well, in our law, it says that he pulled a gun on you, and so you were, legally. It's like, what's murder? It's like murder's the unlawful murdering of ending of someone's life. But what is murder metaphysically and morally? It's an act against man. It's an act against God. The moral law of murder is beyond the legal law of murder. Natural law is mechanical. God's law is for the conscious. Yeah. And I don't think Christopher's trying, he sees the difference between them, but he wants to assume that there's any relevance to natural law. The only relevance is we know what physically happens when you do something, and that could only lead you to some sort of preference. Like, I prefer not to see mass murder and bleeding, so we shouldn't do it. Or that hurts them clearly, and I'd like to avoid hurting them. And then you get into these secular ways of viewing things. So, Aquinas and everyone after him that pushed natural law, whether it was purposeful or not, they inadvertently, if that's the case, started pushing secularism. If you kill, you forfeit your right to life. Not really, not in natural law. Tell that to a lion. There are plenty of people who kill, and they didn't forfeit their right to live. They're still living. The only real consequence that ends up mattering is when they meet their creator. That's it. So that's not even true. If you kill, you forfeit your right. No, you don't. You don't forfeit your right to life. If you kill, you act against yourself and another man. You act against God's commandments. And you have to deal with that, whether it's now or later when you die, but you don't forfeit your right to life, only if you get caught. That's why it's legality. There wouldn't be good and evil under natural law. Yeah, there isn't. Natural law can't justify any metaphysics. Anyway, I got to go. All right, you guys, thanks for joining me. I'll be here tomorrow at some point too, working on some music, working on some animation, working on all sorts of stuff. But it's always fun. I am a lawyer. I am not surprised you're a lawyer. If you break God's law, you become a beast. Yeah. If you break, you can break. Guess what? You can break God's law and abide by natural law. Probably the best way to reduce it, if everything I've said still didn't come through. You can go against God's law and totally be consistent and not in violation of natural law. Anyway, peace. Jim Bob.